Welcome to episode 3 of the countdown to 2023. In episode 2, we spoke about the word of the year, gaslighting. And as if to light more fire and light up the environment, we've introduced another term, moonlighting, which was quite the rage in the last year, 2022, but for very different reasons. As we did in the episode on gaslighting, we will follow pretty much the same track. First, we'll talk about what moonlighting is. Secondly, we'll talk about some of the macro trends shaping this whole debate and discussion around moonlighting. And here there are two sides or two aspects. We will not just look at one aspect in isolation, and in doing so, we'll also look at some of the trends that have been leading up to this debate, both from the demand side as well as the supply side. So let's get started, firstly, with what moonlighting is all about. Moonlighting is not a new word. It's become quite a rage in 22. That's a different matter altogether. But this word has been around for quite some time. And it's not used in a very positive sort of sense. It's used in a negative sense to denote or connote the actions of somebody who, while in an employment, while in a job, is doing something else for monetary considerations on the sidelines. So that's what the concept of moonlighting is all about. This has been in practice, in place for quite some time. People have taken various stands around moonlighting. By and large, the corporates, the large organizations, they have not been in favor of moonlighting. And the argument is very simple. We pay you salary, so we expect full commitment to the organization that you're working for and not to get distracted with your side hustles, with your moonlighting stints, and so on and so forth. And this is irrespective of the fact whether what you're doing constitutes conflict of interest with the duties and the objectives of the organization that you represent. So that's one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin, from an employee standpoint, the debate that usually comes about is that you give me salary for 8 hours of work a day or 40 hours of work in a week, and beyond that, I'm free to do whatever I want to do as long as I am meeting your deliverables, as long as I'm meeting your expectations. You should be fine with that. As long as I'm not doing something which is contradictory or competing with your interests as an organization, you should not have any issue with it. Those are the two sides of the debate which have been there since time immemorial. In order to understand why moonlighting became such a prominent issue and a hot potato in 22, we need to understand two different forces which have been shaping the employment and the job world over the last few years. The first one is slightly older in import, which is the rise of the gig economy. So, as you would know, gig economy is the economy where people are not working for full-time jobs anymore. They are only working as part-time gigsters or picking up freelance work or project-based work, and they are not married or permanently devoted to one organization. By the very nature, it is moonlighting taken to the next level where you're moonlighting across different gigs. Effectively, it legitimizes the practice of moonlighting and makes it mainstream. In a sense, of course, in a positive way. That's one of the trends that has been shaping the employment scenario for quite some time. And there have been numerous predictions over many years now that the gig economy is going to boom like anything and it's going to become the mainstream form in many different careers for many different sort of skill sets. It already is the norm for people in the creative space, people who work as graphics designers, video editors, and so on and so forth. For them, pretty much being a gigster, being a freelancer is the norm. And you have environments like Fiverr, Upwork, where you find these people a dime a dozen, and you can get the best of talent there rather than in the employment market. That's been one trend which has been shaping this aspect of people wanting to do part-time work, freelancing work, and be the masters of their own destiny, not tied into any employment. The second thing, as a backdrop, which one needs to understand in this whole discussion and debate, is particularly around the demand for tech talent. As we know, the pandemic hit us a few years ago in 2020, and people and companies that did not have their digital systems in place, they were left in a mad scramble for tech talent, trying to digitalize everything and ensure that work happens remotely. What did this do? Well, the most obvious thing that happened was the demand for tech talent went through the roof. As a corollary, what happened is the salaries of tech talent also went through the roof. The third thing which happened, which is the most important aspect here, is that companies started overestimating the demand and treated the temporary demand as permanent demand. In supply chain, there is a concept called bullwhip effect. Whenever there's a slight peak or surge in demand, you take it as real and permanent, you start planning for that, and you build up more stock and resources so that you are able to meet that increase in demand. And what happens after a point in time is that the demand kind of evens out and starts dropping, and your talent or your resources or your stocks, in the case of supply chain, and in this case, your supply of human resources, has become stocked and peaks only at a later stage. And it is at that stage that you realize that the demand has actually come down. And what you're left with is surplus stock, surplus inventory, surplus capacity, and in this case, surplus manpower, which anyway is being paid much higher than the normal or the average wage rates that were in existence pre-pandemic. What happens as a result of this is what we saw last year, a massive frenzy of firing of tech talent or other talent for that matter, as companies realized that the assumptions that they made pre-pandemic about the new normal were not true anymore, and they had to adjust to a different reality. A lot of companies have gone on record stating that what they are doing are proactive measures so that they don't face the heat later on. Well, what happens in future, we don't know, but this is what is happening right now. We've heard two stories about why the gig economy has become prominent on the supply side. From a corporate standpoint, we've seen how the demand for tech talent went through the roof. There was miscalculation or overestimation of demand, an increase in wage rates, and how that has resulted in this scenario of surplus manpower at high rates. Now, combine these two forces together, and what you have is a situation where people are found not putting in their 100% or not perceived to be putting in their 100%, depending on which side of the argument you are tuned into. This makes it an absolutely slam dunk case for a corporate to say that because an employer is not giving their 100% to the job in remote working conditions, because they are working from home or offline, not attending meetings, not doing their bit, moonlighting on the side. So, moonlighting has become an additional clause which is imposed upon the employee to prove that they need to be fired or they need to move on. And that is why moonlighting has become such an important and heated buzzword in 2022. So that's it from the corporate side. Again, from the employees side, the debates and the discussions are very different. What we are seeing nowadays are a lot of debates and discussions and accusations about CEOs and senior management stating that typically at board level, you would find many board of directors sitting on the boards of multiple companies. Is that not moonlighting? If you can do it, why can't the employees do it? If the CEOs are building their personal brands at company expense, at company time, why can't we? There is a certain logic to that argument in some cases. In some cases, those arguments just do not make any sense, because that's the nature and duty of a leader, of a top management person, to be the ambassador of the company at various external forums. So there are even people who are questioning, why are these people part of certain committees? Now that's how you bring the voice of the organization and of the industry to various industry forums, to government representations, and to question, some of those things kind of borders on the ridiculous. At the same time, there is some merit in people asking questions about how much time is being spent on personal brand building, on social media, etc., by some of the CEOs and corporate leaders who are particularly very prominent on these channels. To cut a long story short, we don't know which way the debate is going to head or conclude, but one thing is for sure, that this debate is going to rage as much in 2023 as we saw it raging in 2022. The two forces, none of them are going to be bogged down. People are going to be continuing to want to become freelancers, gigsters, masters of their own destiny, and would want to do things on their own. That is very much the nature of the next generation of workforce, the Gen Z and the generations coming after that. And that is a force that we just cannot stop. In fact, if you look at the history of employment, it does not have a very long history. If we look at the ancient times or even in the medieval times, it wasn't really a done thing for most of the people to actually go out and seek employment. Most people ended up doing their own thing and earned their own living through their own means, craft or skill they possessed. It is not a surprise that we kind of go back to those times, of course, in a very different context in the modern times. The employment economy has largely been driven by the forces that shaped the Industrial Revolution because it created organizations that needed slaves, that needed employees, that needed people tethered to the organization. But that may not be true anymore as technology takes over, as it makes it possible for individuals also to build organizations in their own right. We are definitely in line for some very, very interesting times ahead. So stay tuned and keep in touch with these trends as they shape the future of what you and me are going to be doing in 2 and 3, 23. So that's it for episode number 3. As always, remember to subscribe to the channel, as also our other channel From the Expert's Mouth. So do hit the like button and leave your comments behind on what you think about this moonlighting debate and which side of the debate are you on. You can have a one-sided opinion, that's absolutely fine, but I would love to hear from you.